Hello, writers! I am Kristen Kieffer, and you are listening into episode number 39 of the Well-Storied podcast. Today, I am translating the third and final article in our blog miniseries on the three-act story structure into audio for you guys. It has been so fulfilling to take these articles over the past few weeks, which I originally published all the way back in 2016, and that really have been popular staples on the blog ever since, and to update them and to film podcast episodes for them so you guys can listen in on the go. I hope you've been enjoying this series so far as much as I have. This episode today does build on the previous breakdowns of Act 1 and Act 2 of the three-act story structure, so make sure to check those out first. I believe they are episodes number 37 and 38, so go listen to those and then hop back on over here for today's episode of the third act of the three-act story structure. Ready to dive in? Remember, you can always check out the text version of today's episode by tuning into the original article over on the blog, which you can find at well-storied.com/act3. Just make sure to spell out the 3 in Act 3 rather than typing in the number, and you should be good to go. Sound like a plan? Now let's get into today's episode, shall we? Writers, it is time to go out with a bang. Today we're back with the third and final installment in our blog miniseries on the three-act story structure. Each article in this series builds upon the last, so make sure to check out the first 2 installments before diving in. All caught up? Fantastic! Today we're diving into Act 3 of the three-act story structure. Tension is thick. The final conflict between your protagonist and antagonist looms on the horizon. How can you ensure you write a finale that will blow your readers away? Let's get started with today's breakdown. And let's begin with an overview of the third act. If Act 1 of the three-act story structure is all about introduction, and Act 2 about opposition, then Act 3 is all about resolution. Beginning where Act 2 left off, which is somewhere between the 75 and 90% mark of your story, Act 3 flows through the very last page of your book and features 3 important hallmarks: the dark night of the soul, the climactic sequence, and the resolution. But as these hallmarks suggest, Act 3 does not begin by tying up loose ends. Rather, it shakes things up by pushing your protagonist to their breaking point. Let's explore the dark night of the soul first, shall we? Throughout your story, your protagonist has harbored a core flaw or fear, which causes them to believe a lie about themselves or the world around them. This is the lie that made your protagonist hesitate to answer the call to adventure in Act 1, and that led them to remain largely reactive during the first half of Act 2. And still, despite the positive strides your protagonist has made post-midpoint, they've yet to address this core flaw or fear when Act 3 begins. The lie your protagonist believes is their greatest weakness, but they won't be able to ignore it much longer. After recognizing the protagonist's growing strength, your story's antagonist rallies to deliver a shocking blow just moments before your story's climactic sequence. This moment is known as the dark night of the soul, and it blindsides your protagonist, pushing them to their breaking point. At last, they must confront the lie they believe, or give up everything they've worked so hard to achieve. Though the Dark Night of the Soul is often short in length, just 2 or 3 key scenes, this turning point is immensely powerful. It reiterates the threat that your antagonist poses, it reinforces and increases your story's stakes, and it establishes your protagonist's full development as your story's hero. Want to see a few examples of the Dark Night of the Soul in action? Check out these popular books. In The Hunger Games by Suzanne Collins, Katniss realizes that the mutated hounds chasing her bear striking resemblances to the deceased tributes, including those that she killed, dredging up trauma that Katniss has suppressed to survive. In Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen, Elizabeth is forced to confront her feelings for Mr. Darcy when his haughty Aunt Catherine arrives, demanding Elizabeth state that she will never accept a marriage proposal from her nephew. And in The Fault in Our Stars by John Green, Hazel must confront the inevitability of death, which she has suppressed throughout her battle with cancer, when, spoiler alert, Augustus dies. Now let's talk about facing down the climactic sequence. Fortunately for your protagonist, the dark night of the soul is unlikely to be the end of their journey. Having confronted the lie that they believe at last, they'll rise from the ashes of this experience with renewed strength, as ready as ever to tackle the climax of their journey. But it won't be easy. The stakes are higher than ever as your protagonist prepares to tangle with the antagonist or whatever opposing force your story has one last time. In many cases, the protagonist's odds of success are slim, but that won't stop them from doing everything in their power to overcome the opposition in a sequence of events known as the climactic sequence, or the climax. The climax may take place anywhere between the 80% and 95% mark of a story, and it will indeed spell an end to the conflict between your story's protagonist and antagonist. But contrary to popular belief, the climactic sequence isn't all about external action. It also solidifies the story's theme. You see, theme is intricately tied to the protagonist's journey to overcome their core flaw or fear. Though the dark night of the soul is the moment that will solidify the protagonist's transformation, it's the climactic sequence itself that will showcase just how important that transformation is to the protagonist's future. Freed from the bonds of their lie, the protagonist can at last complete their journey, overcoming the antagonist or achieving their story goal. Need a few examples? Check out these popular climactic sequences from literature. In The Hunger Games, Katniss saves Peeta from Cato, the final tribute, later killing him as an act of mercy when he is mauled by the Mutts. When the game makers try to force Katniss and Peeta to fight to the death, the two actually move to commit suicide instead, maintaining their integrity despite the Capitol's demands. In Pride and Prejudice, Elizabeth's conversation with Darcy's aunt rekindles Darcy's hope in her affections. He invites Elizabeth on a walk where both confess their wrongdoings and their love. Darcy proposes and Elizabeth accepts. In The Fault in Our Stars, the author of Hazel's favorite book confesses that his main character was based on his own daughter, who died of cancer. Hazel realizes that the author no more has the answers to life's ambiguous ending than she does, and she forgives him for his actions in Amsterdam and encourages him to begin writing again. Now let's talk about resolving your story's loose ends. After the climactic sequence of a story, there remain a few loose ends that need to be resolved before you can write the end, which is why the final hallmark of Act 3 is known as the resolution. Depending on the type of story you're writing, your protagonist may yet need to achieve their story goal. This typically occurs when a character must first overcome the antagonist before actually gaining the ability to achieve their goal, and so their ultimate victory comes during the story's resolution rather than its climactic sequence. But the resolution of a story should also see the protagonist righting any wrongs committed before or during their journey, particularly those that stemmed from their core flaw or fear. And of course, the climactic sequence itself likely presented a few consequences that the protagonist will now need to clean up. With all of these loose ends resolved, or most of them if you're writing a series or a story with a more ambiguous ending, all that remains is to establish the protagonist's new everyday normal. Hopefully one that provides your protagonist significantly more satisfaction than the everyday normal they experienced at the beginning of your story. Need a few examples? Check out these popular examples of resolutions from popular books. Did I say popular enough times? In The Hunger Games by Suzanne Collins, the game makers cut the game short after realizing Katniss and Peeta's intent to commit suicide. They are taken to the hospital and later home, where they must put on a show as the winners of the games, but are ultimately safe. For now. In Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen, Elizabeth and Jane both marry their respective beaux. Elizabeth's family finds some much-needed financial and emotional stability, and Darcy's aunt at last deigns to visit him and Elizabeth, giving the happy couple hope for the future. In The Fault in Our Stars by John Green, Hazel discovers a letter Augustus wrote to her before his death, explaining that there will always be pain in life, but that one can choose who they allow to hurt them. He then tells Hazel that he, too, has no regrets from their short time together. And finally, let's wrap up the three-act story structure. The three-act story structure is not without its limits. The blueprint it outlines is largely linear and tends to work best with a limited number of subplots and points of view, though I have been known to tweak this bad boy to my own multiple point of view needs from time to time. But I will say that what I love most about the three-act story structure is its comprehensive nature. It doesn't just help you create a basic outline for your story. It shows you how to craft powerful, interwoven plot and character arcs that together create a story your readers won't soon forget. And it manages to do all of this while maintaining the flexibility needed to support a wide variety of stories, perhaps your own included. If you're new to the craft of storytelling, some of the topics I mentioned as we discussed the three-act story structure might have been kind of foreign to you. If you're ready to dive in deep, I have collected all of these topics, all of the articles that I've written on these topics over in the transcript for today's episode of the podcast, which you can find at well-storied.com/act3. Make sure to check those out. However, if you are ready to get started with your story, you're ready to pre-write and really prepare to write an awesome first draft, but you're looking for more structured guidance because you just don't know how to kind of organize all of these notes and these character sketches and figure out how to plot your story and outline and research and all of that good stuff, might I recommend to you the Pre-Write Project. The Pre-Write Project is a 143-page digital workbook that I designed specifically to zap the overwhelm out of the pre-write process. By completing the activities and the guiding questions in this workbook, you'll create a reference guide to use as you write and edit your story, helping you avoid the messiness of writing by the seat of your pants and instead embrace the power of drafting with a plan in place. If you would like to learn more about the Pre-Write Project and grab your copy today, you can head on over to well-storied.com/prewrite. Sound like a plan? And we did it! Writers, I hope you found a lot of value in today's episode of the podcast and in our 3 episodes on the three-act story structure as a whole. As I said in this episode, the three-act story structure is such a powerful tool. It may not be the right tool for every writer or for every story, but I definitely think it's worth giving a shot if you've never used this story structure before. It has certainly worked wonders in my own writing process, so go ahead and give it a shot. And if you did enjoy today's episode, make sure to subscribe and leave a rating and review if you're on iTunes. You can also subscribe on SoundCloud and leave a like or a comment if you're listening in from YouTube, just to make sure that you don't miss an episode, any of the future episodes that are coming up, and to also let me know that you're enjoying what I'm dishing out so I will keep on creating. If you'd like to help support the podcast monetarily, I do run a Patreon account that supports all that I create at Well-Storied. To get involved for as little as $1 a month, head on over to patreon.com/well-storied. Alright friends, that wraps up today's episode of the podcast. Thank you again for listening in, and I will see you all next time. Happy writing, friends. Bye.